What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Big Five Pod, episode number 129. I am Kyle Marlowe, co-host Jake Copestick. Cope, I'll ask you how you're doing in a second. But first, we got on Ian Wenik from ivyhoopsonline.com, previewing the Penn and the Ivy League season. Ian, how's it going? Welcome back.
Thank you for having me on again. I can't believe I've earned a repeat invite.
Absolutely. You absolutely did. You do great stuff over there. So pleasure to have you on and talk Penn and Ivy League basketball. So we're going to get right into it. First things first with Penn in this 2025-2026 season as we preview them. Of course, as a common theme with a lot of the Big Five teams is a new head coach, a new regime after a decade of Steve Donahue. Now Fran McCaffrey comes in from Iowa, back at his alma mater. We're all very excited about it, but of course now after the offseason and getting used to the name being there, now it's time to see it on the court and the basketball. So maybe you don't have to give me a whole expectation of his tenure and what that's going to look like at Penn, but at least for year one, what are you expecting to be different from Fran McCaffrey's regime as opposed to Steve Donahue's?
That's a good question. I think where I would start has to be, pace. Both Fran McCaffrey and Steve Donahue were highly respected X's and O's offensive coaches, whereas Penn played a little bit slower tempo. Some was in the 180, some was a little bit lower. Well, Donahue was coaching. I would expect Penn to be somewhere within the top 100, if not like the top 75 in terms of pace, tempo. So I expect this team to play a lot faster, pace and space style offense. There's a lot of shooters or people that can stretch the floor, which we can get into. So I think that's the first thing, is that we're going to see a much faster paced team. Now, the good question is, are the athletes on the roster as currently constructed, do they have the capabilities to play within the scheme to the point in which they can be a contender right out of the gate? And that's a more difficult question to answer, but I think it's obvious this is going to be a much more aggressive and arguably more efficient offensive team this year.
And we will definitely get into that for sure. But Cope, how are you? What are your thoughts on, in general, Penn before we dive into the nitty-gritty of the 2025-26 season?
Well, thank you. I thought you were going to forget about me again.
I would never forget about you.
Ian, it's great to have you on again. You certainly earned an invite, especially after the year that you, being a Penn season ticket holder, had to unfortunately endure last year. And even when it wasn't pretty, this dude was still there. He was still there doing this after Nick Spinoso scored right behind the bench. Ian was still out there, supporting the Quakers. But it's good to have you back. For sure, and look forward to hopefully seeing some more wins with you in the crowd at the Palestra this year. Getting into this team, absolutely they're going to play faster. A far cry from the methodical, especially offensive pace that Steve Donahue was playing at. Long term, I think this will be a more athletic team, something that the team really lacked last year. As Ian mentioned, they could lack this year. We can get into that more, but in the long term, a more athletic team, a certainly faster team, going to be a total paradigm switch as far as how fast this team is going to play. And another thing, too, I know there's a lot of things that went wrong last year, but 240th this team finished in three-point percentage. As a team, not even 33%. You will not see that with a Fran McCaffrey offense and a Fran McCaffrey team again. It was a shockingly bad three-point shooting team. I thought they had the pieces there. They had Ethan Roberts. They had Michael Zanoni, who unfortunately was hurt, and that hurt the three-point percentage. Nicholas Polanowski did not have a great year. And there was just guys that were good shooters. You had Cam Thrower, who was really hurt, who was hurt last year and didn't get to go in there as a guy that could make threes. But just and Sam Brown, was very cold to start. And he picked it up. And he had that game at Columbia where he broke all those records, scored all those points. But out of the gate and really all season, this was just a team that it seemed like they had the personnel. You had the history of the percentages. It just didn't come to fruition last year. But as far as Fran McCaffrey's concerned, as long as he's here, that 240th national rank in the three-point percentage, that is not going to happen again with this team. They will be a far better three-point shooting team. His freshman class coming in next year is going to shoot the lights out and can shoot threes very well. This team will hopefully do it a little better. But Fran McCaffrey will have top-tier shooting teams. Not that Steve Donahue did not last year, the 240th rank. Not on Fran McCaffrey's watch, not going to happen.
No, and it was even shocking for it to happen last year, just considering where they were even the year before. Before they had Ethan Roberts, they were a much better shooting team. So was shocking to say the least. Now some pieces are not there anymore, like Sam Brown, who was arguably their best three-point shooter in terms of talent, maybe not percentage last year, but in terms of talent going into the year. So some turnover for sure, but I want to start at the top, and I want to start with the guy who filled up the stat sheet last year with Ethan Roberts, leading them in scoring. I believe it was almost 17 points a game. He was the guy, and he will be the guy again this year. There's other talent too that we'll get into as well, but I'll start with you. How good can he be, especially going from year one in the Ivy League now, making his second appearance being with Penn and in the Ivy League? How much of a leap can he take in year two?
I mean, it's also worth mentioning that he played hurt with a shoulder injury for a decent chunk of the Ivy season. So he was performing at a high level while not playing 100% and without a tremendous supporting cast around him. I mean, I don't think it's crazy. So Bart Torvik has him projected at 17 points per game and a offensive rating of 109 points per 100 possessions. I think that's totally within reach. And you look at him, he put up double figures almost every single game he played in last season. He's an efficient three-level scorer. He doesn't have the verticality that like a Jordan Dingle had, but he was really good at catch and shoots, playing in transition, really smart cuts. And, he's someone who I think his skill set, it's kind of prototypically built for a McCaffrey style offense because he can shoot, he can cut to the rim, make plays off the ball, on the ball, play guard the three a little bit. So he seems like someone I expect he's going to be the alpha. And I think it's funny, the media expectations for Penn as a whole seem fairly low, but universally, when you look at like the Basket Under Review guys, I'd expect him to be all Ivy first or second team this year, regardless of where the team finishes in the standings.
Yeah, I'm right with you, Ian. I think he could be even better than last year, even with the injury that you speak of. This was still one of the best scorers in this league, one of the best coming back with all the graduations and transfers. I think he could be even better. I got to talk to Fran McCaffrey when I wrote for, and I'll give myself a shameless plug here. When I wrote for the Center Hubs at the Center Hub _BB on Twitter, I wrote for their college basketball preview of every single team. I did the Ivy League, was fortunate enough to speak to 6 of the 8 Ivy League coaches. And when I talked to Fran McCaffrey, he's going to play Ethan Roberts at point guard a little bit. And this is a guy who's not only a nightmare to leave open and give him any sort of air room from the three-point line, who's going to be able to make plays and make decisions off the ball, but he's going to have the ball in his hands and be able to make those himself and be able to create and get the offense going here. So I think he's going to thrive with the pace that they're going to play at, giving a guy like that the ball to get downhill or especially shoot from the perimeter and just create for himself. I think there's a chance he can be even better after it was not a great team year. It's a damn good year for Ethan Roberts. I think he can be even better. I would be very surprised, Ian, if this guy. I think there's the top of the league. There's a handful of guys that can make the first team. This guy is one of them. I think there's 5 I feel very strongly about making the first team. Ethan Roberts is one of them. I think he's already good, and he's poised for even more stardom in Fran McCaffrey's style of play.
Couldn't agree more.
And that makes 3 of us. I think one of the issues that plagued Steve Donahue in his last year or two at Penn was just a lack of overall talent upside. A few years before that, they had Jordan Dingle, Clark Slacker. Obviously, both of those guys transferred to high majors. Last year, it was really just Ethan Roberts and Nick Spinoso. But even Nick Spinoso had his, he was a very, very good player. But I think his ceiling compared to those other guys was not quite as high, obviously. This year with Fran McCaffrey, now they bring in someone who has that potential, especially in the Ivy League, and that's TJ Power, who is a 21st ranked prospect in the 2023 class, committed to Virginia, played sparingly as a freshman, transferred inter-ACC to Duke, played just under 10 minutes a game last year, didn't really contribute all that much to that Blue Devils team, but this is a guy, like I said, who was a top 100 talent, top 25 talent in the country just a couple years ago. He is going to go into the year hurt, although I don't think it's a serious injury, but someone who can be the number two to Ethan Roberts' number one on this team. So, Ian, I want to ask you first, tell us what you know about this injury that TJ Power has. I know it's fairly recent. This has come out where he, seemed like he'll be banged up to start the season. Maybe not a long-term thing, but something that will affect him, in the November and maybe into December a little bit. And secondly, what can he be for this Penn team, especially going from the ACC and high-level college basketball down to, a next tier in the mid-major basketball?
So a lot of threads I can pull on there. So first, all I was operating with was that I understood that this was not expected to be a season-ending injury, but the length of that, how long he was going to be out for, seemed kind of up in the air. I'll give a big hat tip to Connor Smith from the Daily Pennsylvanian, basically the de facto Penn basketball beat reporter.
Shout out Connor Smith.
He did a great job of reporting, showing that he talked to Fran McCaffrey, and Fran said they were shooting to have TJ ready for game one against Rowan on November 7th, which is a pleasant surprise. Looks like it's an elbow injury. I think he suffered it in the days or weeks leading up to the red and blue scrimmage. So, we're taping this late October, so we're looking maybe like a month sidelined, or at least not being able to shoot. So, it's just as long as that's the thing is that with where this team is in its development cycle, he doesn't need him back by Ivy play to be a contributor. And so maybe we can talk a little bit about his skill set. So I have a vested interest in seeing him perform well beyond my own interest, which is that my wife went to Duke. And so I'd like to see an ex-Duke player find his level at Penn. I'm definitely very invested in it. And look, I wrote about it when he first transferred over that this is the exact type of player that Penn should try to get in the transfer portal. Someone with high academic ups. So he was always interested in playing at a high academic school, high major talent. I mean, Fran McCaffrey coveted him all the way back in high school. So he clearly has a very specific vision for how he wants TJ Power to fit into this offense. And if TJ Power can't contribute here, he's not going to contribute at any level of college basketball. But look, the upside of him is, he's a 6'9" guy who can shoot. That's the kind of prototype and build that gets you into the NBA. So best case scenario is that have a true stretch forward can average 14, 15, 16 points per game in the league and can dominate the other fours in the Ivy League that don't have the athleticism that he does, doesn't have the build that he does. And so if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, but the sky is the limit for him. And I expect to see him, probably play a lot at the four. We'll talk a little about Lucas Lewis a little bit. He's another contender to take a lot of minutes there. And maybe they go small and play with the five a little bit, because the five is kind of the biggest unsettled position on this team where there is kind of a dearth of talent.
Yeah, 100%. Would love to get it more into the centers when we move on after TJ here. But yeah, this is a massive, massive get. This doesn't just happen like in this league. You don't get guys with this pedigree. Casey Simmons did it a couple of years ago at Yale, but this is not something that happens every year. And if he can capitalize on his talent and moving down now, he was in a tough situation at Duke where there was just so many guys ahead of him. And there was Kyle Filipowski, and there was Derek Lively, and they had some other big guys there. And then he goes to Virginia, and Tony Bennett leaves, and it was just a kind of a wash season under Ron Sanchez, and they weren't very good. It wasn't what he had signed up for. I think this is the perfect spot. That there's a coach that wants him, that's wanted him for a very long time, as Ethan mentioned, and simply guys with this pedigree and this talent on this team and this league just doesn't come around very often. And Kyle, when you had brought up like this Penn team maybe was lacking that top end talent that it was last year, this is exactly the kind of guy that can turn it around, that you can pair with Ethan Roberts to potentially play big, play the five, play the four. Defensively, not exactly a stalwart and a stopper, but offensively, his size and his shooting and his versatility that he's going to give them in this style. And when I talked to Fran McCaffrey, he gushed over this guy. This is the ultimate situation for Ethan Roberts to succeed. TJ Power to succeed, to really blow up and show people that high pedigree that he came in with. This is this is as big as an upside play and an upside player is as there is in this league. coming in this year as far as newcomers go. You can bring in transfers. Usually they don't come with a top 25 high school ranking attached to them and the talent that he does. So he's one of the biggest swing players in the whole league. If he's good and he breaks out like I think he can, this Penn team's going to be playing an Ivy Madness and breaking a streak.
And Cope, I know you mentioned Ethan Roberts when you met TJ Power there, but I think it's extremely beneficial for Ethan Roberts too, because as you both mentioned, he didn't have that, Robin to his Batman last year. There were a bunch of guys who were solid players, but one, the 3-point, percentages, and we talked ad nauseum a little bit already about it, but we're just so out of whack. And I think we kind of expected Sam Brown to be that second in command in terms of the scoring load. And for a while there, probably into January, early February, he really wasn't that for this Penn team, and it affected them. They could not score the basketball. And believe it or not, you can't win games if you can't score the basketball. This, I think, will be able to take so much of the scoring load off Ethan Roberts, having a true stretch forward and a true talented player in TJ Power. Excuse me. If it goes well, which I think it will, health, knock on wood, that he stays healthy. But I think you want to talk about a supporting cast for someone who was one of the best scorers in the Ivy League last year. This is a guy who can really take the load off, get some of the defensive attention off of Ethan Roberts, and it can benefit both of them just greatly. And Penn's going to need it too. But I want to talk about other guys too in this rotation as well, because it's not just those two, although those are going to be the two that we inevitably talk about the most on this podcast. And Ian, I'm sure you talk about as well in your writing. But who are a couple other guys in this rotation that, Ian, you're looking at to contribute and kind of be some of those really impactful role players for Penn this year?
Yeah, I'll go first to Lucas Lewis, who adds another dimension of athleticism to this team. He was a contributor at Kirkwood Community College, which made a deep run in its postseason tournament. I'm pretty sure that Lucas Lewis might have gotten all-tournament or most outstanding player honors in that.
Most valuable player, yep.
Yeah. So he is someone that, if he starts, I wouldn't be shocked. He's someone who can shoot a little bit, incredibly tenacious on the offensive end, defensive end, good rebounder. You need someone like that who can be kind of a glue guy, do it all. And, this Penn team was not a tremendous, there were a lot of waterfall effects down from kind of Penn's lack of athleticism last year. And I think that he could really help kind of paper over a lot of those issues. So he's someone I'd be excited for. I think Cam Thrower, he missed all of last season due to injury. He was someone who his role kind of yo-yoed in 23-24. He was the starter. He was the starting two guard in the Villanova upset, and then was totally out of the rotation. And then at the end of the year, he had a streak of like 3 or 4 double-figure scoring games. And, he's about 6'3". He plays a little bit bigger. He could be someone who could play a little bit of 1, play a little bit of 2. And I'm excited to see what he would do kind of after a year off to reset and play in a new system. So those two names really stand out to me. AJ Levine, another one who looked briefly like he was going to transfer and then took his name out of the portal once it was obvious that Fran McCaffrey was coming to campus. He was a tremendous defender, huge pest, the kind of guy you probably hate if you're a fan of another team, but you love that he's on yours. He has obviously a lot of room to grow on the offensive end. I believe that last year he had a Ken Pom offensive rating. It was 82.7 points per 100 possessions. It was brutal, but the guy was tremendous at forcing steals. He was top 300 in the country in steal rate, great on-ball defender. So I have to imagine that he's going to be in the mix for point guard minutes as well. And look, if you're looking for someone to coach up, make you a better shooter, you've got the right staff around him.
Cope, you're on mute.
I think in the 4 years we've been doing this, I think that's the first time I've forgotten to take myself off mute. Usually I'm very.
You don't usually go on mute that often, so I was surprised. Then even listen, it's okay. We all do. That's like a Zoom rite of passage. You do that every so often. It's like you're contributing to your membership of being on Zoom. So it is what it is.
Shame that happened because I was on like a literally year streak of not doing that. Anyway, I'll try and bring up some people that Ian did not, so we can kind of hit on everybody here, and we'll get into point guard, we'll get into big, and kind of dive deeper into that. But I'll throw some guys out here to start. 2 for me: Michael Zanoni and Nicholas Palinowski. They're going to need those shooters because at the point guard spot, AJ Levine, his shortcomings, as Ian brought up, got thrown into the point guard role. It was good, it was bad sometimes as far as the turnovers went. Also, it was a sub 30% 3-point shooter as well. So they're going to need shooters around an Ethan Roberts and a TJ Power. These two guys can be that. Michael Zanoni had a great shooting game. They went up at Penn State, unfortunately missed some time due to an unspecified injury where he was out of lineup a little bit. They missed his shooting. An unseasonably bad shooting year for Nicholas Polanowski as well. I think he can the water will find its level with him. So those two guys shooting wise are going to need to have big years. I think Zanoni is in for a huge year. Polanowski as well. I'll touch on Lucas Luth because Ian is as much as TJ Power, he's going to command all the headlines. I think Lucas Luth is a fantastic ad because they've been lacking so much athleticism, and I know he's only one guy, but just for a guy that can block shots, sure he can step out and hit a three, but that can block shots, can rebound on both ends. He could probably play some small ball five and maybe next to a TJ Power. I think you could put those guys on the floor at the same time, maybe play 4 out, 1 in. I think he's got a respectable enough jumper that you could play 5 out, but regardless, he gives you a body that you can move around between the 4 and the 5. But just a guy with his length, his vertical, his ability to play off of 2 feet, dunk the ball off 2 feet, rebound and block shots, I think is massive and is a really, really underrated get. Not to mention, Ian, they stole him from Drexel and they stole him from Brown as well to get him to play at the Palestra. And then one more big I want to talk about, and I'll touch on one freshman here. Augie Gerhardt's going to be big as they kind of figure out who's going to play at center. You now have him going into his 3rd year with the program now. And maybe he doesn't jump off the page in terms of vertical and size and all this stuff, but man, he's a hustler. He's going to sprint his ass off, run into the rim from the defensive end to the offensive end. And this is a very, very good rebounder with his effort and his fire and his want-to. So, his energy and his activity is going to be big, but him being there for 3 years, I think, can be a guy that early on, with newcomers, can be a guy that can help settle the 5 spot a little bit. And then one freshman I want to touch on, because, man, Ian, there's no scholarships. There's a lot of players on this team. There's more players than there is other teams. Peyton Kamen, please circle and keep your eye on this guy. Really nice size at kind of the 2, the 3 spot. I hate to use the term Kyle Anderson when you see a guy play like this, but when you see a guy play, maybe he's not going to run by you. He's not going to sprint by you and have a crazy lethal first step. He gets to his spots. He is a tremendous 3-point shooter, and he's just very crafty in how he scores and getting to the hole, getting inside the 3-point line. Very, very good player in the NEPSAC last year. Dealt with some injuries in high school, kind of fell out of favor recruiting at some places, but Fran McCaffrey was his first phone call and his first real guy from the D1 level that showed interest in him as a freshman. And he showed all the ability in a very good league in the NEPSAC, player of the year, leading scorer. I think this guy's a diamond in the rough we're going to have to look out for. A very late ad as well. Peyton Kamen for freshman. Circle it, put a pin in it. Really, really good shooter and great offensive game for a freshman. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to contribute right away for this team.
Jay Jones, I like a lot too. He's someone who looks like he can be an immediate contributor and play a little bit of the 2 as well. Good shooter. Also worth mentioning that he is the son of former Columbia head coach and current BU head coach Joe Jones and the nephew of Yale coach James Jones. So that'll be very fun to see him go up against some family twice a year for the next 4 years.
Love it. Love it. I'll add in a couple guys real quick. Not guys that are already on the roster last year, but should be a little bit familiar with. I'm interested in seeing, what their roles are. Braden Foster's one of them. Played in 12 games last year, started 3, 6'8" forward. I feel like showed a little bit of upside. I'm curious to see how he fits in with this roster, and we'll see how that unfolds. But I am curious about him, going to a sophomore season. And then Dylan Williams as well, who now is a senior, transferred in last year. Didn't have a great year, but started 11 games at the guard position for Steve Donahue last year. Shot 32% from the field, which is obviously not all that great, but he will contribute to the guard minutes as well, being an upperclassman. And, you talk about AJ Levine too. It will be another one who's going to contribute to the guard position as well in those minutes. But I'm interested to see how those two fit in the rotation. I don't know if they're necessarily players who will jump off the page at you and be like, you should watch out, and this guy's going to be a major factor and all that. I don't know if I'm going to say all that about those guys, but definitely curious to see how they fit in the rotation. I think they'll contribute. I don't know exactly what the upside is of those two. I think Braden Foster more than Dylan Williams, just because at this point, Williams is a senior. We kind of know what he is. If he can take another little bit of a step this year, that'd be great. Especially upping his scoring efficiency, I think would be huge. But Braden Foster being the main one, only being a sophomore and starting a few games last year as a freshman, I'm curious to see how that will go for him in his sophomore year. Ian, let's get into kind of expectations for Penn this year. And I know that in the coaches' polls and the media, people are not very high on this Penn team, which after last year, I get it. It was not a good year for the Quakers last year by any means, but new head coach, kept a lot of the same players, but also added some new freshmen. Obviously added TJ Power, a couple other transfers like Lucas Luth we talked about. What are your expectations for Penn in the Ivy League this season?
So the way that I kind of frame it, and I've used this phrase when I talk about the Giants, is I'm looking for directionally good as opposed to objectively good. And so what do I mean by that? So right now I'm looking at Bartorvik.com. He's got Penn projected to rank 350th out of 365 Division I basketball teams in adjusted defense. I mean, that's kind of brutal. I don't think that it's fair to Fran McCaffrey expecting him to take a team that finished almost sub 300 in KenPom, lost its second best player to the transfer portal. And I mean, the ads, like, you have a bunch of freshmen. We didn't mention William Cruz, who's a high 6 foot, 7 foot, depending on how you measure him, freshman. There's a lot of talent coming in the freshman class and then in the recruiting class next year as well. We can talk about that. I think there's a lot to like about next year's recruiting class. But I don't think that it's fair to expect this new coaches have to come in, bring in 2 transfers, one of which is transferring up from a JUCO, and 5 freshmen, and expect things to transform overnight and this team to magically become an Ivy League title contender. I don't think that's fair to the guys on the roster. I don't think that's fair to the coaching staff. So, Kevin Sweeney from Sports Illustrated, he had Penn ranked, I believe, as 234. It might be 231. It's in that range. If this team finishes in the top 200 in KenPom, I think that would be a success. This team is really progressing. There are 278 preseasons. That'd be a real sign of growth and progress. And if they get into Ivy Madness, that's great. But if they're at least competitive and maybe get Princeton once for the first time since Patrick Mahomes had won career stars as an NFL quarterback, I think that'd be pretty nice. I think that'd be pretty nice too. So I think that the fruits of bringing Fran McCaffrey are really going to manifest themselves in 2 years, 3 years, when he's had multiple recruiting cycles, bringing in these 3-star and above high school recruits and playing them in his system for multiple years.
Yeah, you're right on Ethan. Geez, I almost called. I called you.
You're calling Ethan Roberts.
Sorry, long day, Ian. My apologies. You're absolutely right. Long term, this is going to be a move that I think really works out and shakes up the Ivy League with Fran McCaffrey coming in there. We can touch on his class he is coming in next year a little bit, Ian. Also, a guy that's going to utilize the transfer portal as well, and he showed that year over year. Fran McCaffrey is going to work, but he's just taken over a situation where it was one of Steve Donahue's, if not his worst season. They just were not really. They were very bad defensively. Offensively, it came and went. He's taking over a very tough situation. And Ian, if they were to finish inside the top 200 of KenPom, that would be an almost 100 position leap as to where they finished last year. So that would be quite the improvement. But they do certainly have the talent to be in that top 4. This is a league that brings back a lot. So does Penn. Good news is they bring back over 10 guys. The bad news, I guess, Ian, is that they bring back a bunch of guys from a team that was not very good last year. I just think they can be utilized a little better. with what Fran McCaffrey has going for him. It's not going to be perfect all the time. I mean, he didn't recruit most of any of these guys, so there's going to be some bumps as to who can play and who can't. But the talent, the coaching, the pedigree from Mr. McCaffrey, a Quaker in his own right, is certainly there. I see three teams at the top, and we'll delve more into the rest of the league. But I think there's three real players here, with Yale, who is totally in a league of their own. There's quite a drop-off. Cornell is very good, but they're not Yale. Harvard is bringing back a lot of guys. They're not Yale either. And then it's wide open for that last spot, Ian. It really is. And this Penn team, although there's a lot of work to be done, this Penn team can be that team that sneaks into the top four. Although not a failure if they don't, because Fran McCaffrey, again, not exactly taking over a desirable situation, but he has a lot of guys that wanted to stay, get it right, play for him. Top four is in reach. It might be four, but top four is certainly in reach here, Ian.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I mean, Evan Miyakawa, he does a lot of really good work too. So he's got Penn 247th preseason, and he's got their ceiling, if everything works perfectly, at 110th. And I think that's a very fair range to have as a best case scenario. But, it's not everything's going to go right. Not everything's going to go wrong. The truth is usually somewhere in the middle. I think if this team is better than 200 by the end of the year, I think you view that as a success. The only thing that's a shame is that you're not going to have Ethan Roberts next year for year two with additional talent coming in.
Yeah, but you could have TJ Power, which I think is also a big thing too. By the way, shout out Evan Miyakawa. His site is awesome. I use it a lot for just statistics throughout the season, and especially for tournament prep when it gets to be that time. Definitely want to give him a special shout out to the college basketball analytic community. He's definitely up there now in the last couple of years, making his name for himself with the Ken Poms and the Bart Torviks of the world. So shout out to them. Of course, we'll also keep using Ken Pom and Bart Torvik as well. But speaking of Ken Pom's got them 8th at the bottom of the Ivy League, 278 net rating. Ian, I think you mentioned that. 341st defensive rating, and I think you mentioned that as well. But do I agree with that? I don't know. It's a little hard to argue, only because they had such a terrible season last year. But do I think they can at least jump up to 6th and be ahead of Columbia and Dartmouth? Yeah, absolutely. I think there's talent there, as you both mentioned, that they can do that. That's probably where I'll put them. If I had to say right now, I'll put them at 6th ahead of both Dartmouth and Columbia. I don't know if they have enough to be ahead of Princeton or Cornell at this point. Cope, as you mentioned, Yale and Harvard, that's the top two. They're going to be the top two. And then, Brown and Cornell will filter in there as well. We could talk about that in a second. But I think Penn will finish 6th in the conference. I don't think they'll finish at the bottom. I think with a new system, being able to hopefully utilize guys a little bit better than they were used last year. And then also, I think the biggest thing for me, I thought it would happen at some point last year. I guess it did a little bit toward the end of the season, but positive shooting regression from beyond the arc. It can't go as bad as it did last year. I mean, this was a team that had shooting talent, and really only two guys, and Zanoni and Roberts, shot above 35% consistently. Sam Brown, did toward the end of the year. He was a lot better in February and March, but it won't go that bad this year, especially in an even more high-powered, high-tempoed offense like you see in the Fran McCaffrey system in his years at Iowa and Siena before that as well. But I think all of those factors, and it's not saying that much that they're going to be, instead of 8th, they're going to be 6th ahead of Columbia and Dartmouth. But I think it's certainly possible, and I think likely. I don't think they will be at the bottom as they are projected in a lot of circles. So that's just me. But the Ivy League this year, once again, will be extremely competitive, and I do think they can make a bid for the top 4. But Ian, I want to start with you and kind of talk about the Ivy League as a whole, because as I just mentioned, Yale probably going to be the actually they definitely are the odds-on favorite at this point to win the Ivy League for whatever many time and however many years, but they're always in contention. But Harvard this year is going to be back to hopefully being, maybe not hopefully for Penn, but for the league as a whole being what they have in the past. How do you see this Ivy League season unfolding, and being that it is a one bid league, who will be earning that bid come the end of March?
Well, I think that we can kind of get into the macro of the college basketball landscape. And I think one thing that we've seen is that, yes, there is some top end talent that is leaving the Ivy League. I mean, Jordan Dingle, we know how that worked out for him. Caden Pierce sitting out this year. There are some other factors beyond just money that played a role with that. Malik Mack. Even with some of that top end talent leaving, the Ivy League does better than pretty much any conference in the country now in terms of continuity. I believe the league returned roughly 60% of its available minutes, which is definitely number one of any conference. And so what helps is that you still have a good sense of teams with continuity over year, talented players sticking around, role guys sticking around, having a decent sense of how systems work. And given all that and the top end talent that stuck around with Yale, I mean, it's pretty much impossible for me, or I think any kind of rational objective observer, to have anybody but Yale finishing first in the regular season. I mean, I'll go back to Evan Miyakawa. The best case scenario for Yale that he's got is 34th. A team that finishes 34th, especially out of a one bid league, is a team that can go to the Sweet 16. So, and I think they do have the talent. I mean, Nick Townsend, I view him as the odds-on favorite to win Ivy League Player of the Year. Samson Allerton, tremendous rim protector, turned down multiple high major offers. I mean, he was playing with the Baylor guys over the summer too. Samson Allerton returning as a big man. Casey Simmons, probably all Ivy expectations for him. Isaac Sealskar, I expect him to make a big leap as a sophomore. The only question I have for Yale is who's going to be the point guard now that Bezembe, the reigning Ivy League Player of the Year, has graduated. I believe he might have gotten a G League look briefly. I know John Poulikitis did. So they had to figure out who's going to play the one, but there's so much talent in the front court from 3 on above that there's a decent chance that team is undefeated before it gets its one chance against a power opponent at Alabama at Coleman Coliseum in December. And that would be appointment TV, in my opinion. So I have Yale as a clear one. And we're talking again about talent retention. I think Harvard, even though, I have some skepticism about Tommy Amaker's skills as an in-game coach from time to time. And obviously Harvard has had a lot of talent on paper and missed the tournament for a whole bunch of reasons, including injuries to some key players over the years. Returning Chandler PJ, Bart Torvik loves him. Robert Hinton, probably the best returning sophomore in the conference. Probably going to be a first-team All-Ivy contender. Thomas Batiste, another good player. I feel like Harvard's a pretty safe pick as a consensus too. And then again, we talk about systems. I have Cornell just based on their system. And again, keeping Cooper Nord after he briefly entered the transfer portal. I have them as the solid 3. And then that 4, I mean, it's wide open. I don't want to pick against Princeton because they have talent. It's just tough. They've done it. It's kind of like the Chiefs. Like, you don't pick against them until proven otherwise. So I'll slot them in the 4 for the time being, but they have some serious issues and they had a very rough season on a lot of levels last year. So to me, it's kind of a coin flip between Princeton and Brown for that 4th spot. If you told me that Penn was in the mix, I wouldn't find it totally crazy. But I think there's a clear Yale for people who are just listening on audio. I got my arm up here for Yale, moving it down about 8 inches to Harvard, and then there's everybody else.
So I'll touch on Yale because they're my winner as well, and I'll get into the rest of the conference, which I think really truly is wide open after 3. After I have Cornell at 2 personally, which I'll get into. I have Yale, Cornell, Harvard, and then I personally picked Penn at 4, but it's super, super wide open. I mean, I think either of these teams can make it. But I'll touch on Yale. And I have Nick Townsend as my player of the year in this conference. Not only is he a total mismatch nightmare, and when Yale came to the Palestra last year, Ian, and they tried to put George Smith on him to start, what did Yale do? They just threw the ball down to him and said, all right, we'll throw Nick Townsend, who looks like a bodybuilder. We'll throw him the ball. He's going to bully anybody who's smaller than him down on the block. Oh, and also, Nick Townsend turned into a 40% three-point shooter last year. So he took his game outside. And when I talked to James Jones, he's going to shoot more threes. He's not going to shoot that percentage because it was so high, but he's going to shoot more threes. With the loss of John Poulikitis, one of the best scorers in this conference. And then you lose Bez Mbeng, the 3-time reigning defensive player of the year in this conference. There's a lot at the guard spot for Yale to fill in the gaps. But guess what? 2 years ago, they lost Danny Wolf and they lost Matt Nowling. What'd they do? They went right back to the tournament. In years past, they've lost Azar Swain, went right back to the tournament. James Jones, time and time again, has shown even in transition years, when his best players move on and graduate, he does not skip a beat. His teams are still competitive and will play for that berth in the tournament. So once again, they're going to dominate. The best big man tandem in this league with Nick Townsend and Samson Alaton. Jones said he wants to make a more concerted effort as the offense is spread around to use Alaton's athleticism as a lob threat. And then Isaac Selsgaard is going to be one of the bigger breakout candidates in this league. You're going to see him not just be the backup to a Nick Townsend and a Samson Alaton. You're going to see him play on the perimeter more. And when that's the case, Ian, that's a really big 3, 4, 5 you have. That trio right there of Selsgaard, Townsend, and Alaton is going to grab just about every rebound. And not to mention, Casey Simmons is back, who might take the Defensive Player of the Year award right from Bez Mbang and keep it on the Yale Bulldogs team, one of the better athletes in this league who's going to draw the hardest defensive assignment every night. At the guard spot, it's going to be critical. They have Riley Fox, who's a sharpshooter. They have Trevor Mullen, who's a quick little guy who can shoot but get in the paint as well and get by people. They have Devin Arlington. They have some guys who are back, Jordan Breathwaite. Here's where I think the swing piece is, and that would be the freshman in Courtney Wallace. This guy's got size, athleticism. Physically, James Jones thinks he's ready to go and compete right away, which is usually the biggest hindrance with these high school kids going up to the college level. But if Courtney Wallace, down the road, this is going to be a really good player for this Yale team. If he can show it year one, they're going to dominate. They're going to run away with this, I think. I don't really see a scenario where they don't. If Courtney Wallace plays really well, Ian, this is a team that, again, is going to be one that you're not going to want to play on Selection Sunday if they make it.
I mean, they lost a first-round pick in the NBA draft, and they got better. It's absurd. It's absurd they managed to pull that off, but they did. And so if they can survive losing Danny Wolf, who's now, his face on the side of the Barclays Center, I think that they can handle losing Mbang and losing Poulikitis. They have just the system, and James Jones has shown so much as a coach that it's hard for me to pick against him. It's almost impossible.
I'm not going to do it until I'm proven otherwise. Goes for, they've almost reached Vermont Colgate type levels. They're just that good. I won't pick against them until proven otherwise. I want to talk Cornell and then just touch on Harvard because you did a good job going over them with how good Robert Hinton's going to be. But John Jakes is one of the my favorite coaches that I talk to. His play style is awesome. And when they play Penn, they're going to score 200 points in this game. They might both eclipse 100 when they play. They're going to play the game on roller skates. But the offensive numbers that Cooper Nord put up last year were absolutely insane. I mean, well over 1 point per possession. Shooting-wise was terrific. Nearly 50% from the field, almost 42% from three. The best three-point shooter in the Ivy League returns in Cooper Nord. But something that stuck out with me when I talked to John Jakes is not only is the efficiency and the skill and the numbers there with Cooper Nord, but the gravity and the attention that he creates and he demands from the opponent on the defensive end to open things up for the rest of the team is really one of his strengths, which is crazy to think that he called him elite without the ball, which I think is a tremendous compliment to somebody's IQ and their skill and their attention on the scouting report. But they bring back Jake Fegan as well, over 38% three-point shooter in his own right. And being that we're a Big Five pod and cover the Philly teams, I got to bring up Jacob Beckles from Philadelphia here, one of the fastest, if not the fastest player in this conference. Just going to add another layer to the guards on this Cornell team. You have shooting, you now have speed with him to get out in transition and push the pace. And I also really like the JUCO guard they brought in Demarion Fishburne. Going to be a glue guy, a very good three-point shooter in his own right at the junior college level. But I think he can kind of marry everything together here and be a glue guy. His defense can rebound a little bit, which they're going to need with their maybe lack of top-end size. The guard depth on this Cornell team is very good. And then lastly, got to mention Casper Sepp, their other transfer that they brought in from Valpo. Only 6'7", a tremendous rebounder and was a tremendous rebounder for Valpo. And even at 6'7", that activity, the numbers he has, how hard he plays is going to make up for his lack of height and is a very good piece to bring in because maybe you didn't see it last year, Valpo, but his shooting, his passing, and his playmaking, something that's demanded of the Cornell bigs, is something that you're going to see with him. So I have Cornell at 2. Ian, to your point, the talent's been there for Harvard. They just don't have the Ivy Madness appearances and ultimately the tournament appearances to show for it. That's why I have them 3rd. But Robert Hitton's going to be one of the best players at the mid and the low major level. And they bring back, like you said, Thomas Batiste. They bring back Chandler PJ. Austin Hunt, I think, is going to have a big year for them as well, shooting the ball. They bring back players in their own right. They're certainly up there. That's my top 3. Yale at the top, quite the drop-off. Not a slight at anybody else. I'll take Cornell, and then I'll take Harvard. And then would love to hear your take, Ian, as to who you think in a wide open, in my opinion, last 5 or bottom 5, if you will, after the top 3 can maybe grab that 4th spot.
Yeah, I mean, I'll roll with Princeton for the time being, though I don't feel great about it. You can make a case for a lot of teams. I mean, I'm kind of surprised at how much the metrics love Brown, even with Keno Lilly gone. I mean, he's a very, very difficult player for them to replace. I mean, he does some talent. Landon Lewis, obviously, very good. Landon Lewis, obviously, a very good player. Lesbert, also another solid contributor. But yeah, it's wide open. I mean, you could tell me Columbia makes it, and I'd believe that. I think that Columbia, for as rough as the season that they had last year, they returned most of the rotation, and there is some high recruiting pedigree talent on that roster as well.
So I want you to delve a little bit deeper into Princeton and just give me your take. Because here's the thing. I had to pick somebody last. I didn't want to because I think the league's that open is going to be that much fun as it always is. I had to pick somebody last. But I just have a hard time envisioning them. Like last year, it was disappointing. And you sure they didn't have the depth. But think about this from last year's team, Ian. Obviously, you lose Avian Lee, your spark plug, your scorer, your go-to guy. You lose your best rebounder in Caden Pierce. You do it all. You first of all, the experience. They have nobody remaining from that Sweet 16. This is a true transition season for Mitch Henderson and Princeton, who not only that, Ian, is going to bring in 6 freshmen. It's a transition year in every sense of the word here. And then you're going to lose Blake Peters on top of that, your best 3-point shooter. I just see too much unknown. Look, plenty of guys, Jackson Hickey, Dalen Davis, Malik Abdullahi, CJ Happy. There's young players who are tailor-made to step into those bigger roles, have sophomore leaps. I just see too much unknown with Princeton for me to vote them 4th, especially with the season they had last year where they just didn't live up to how good we all thought that they were going to be. So I actually have Princeton 7th, Ian. And I have to. Somebody's got to finish at the bottom. I hate to do that. But I have Princeton at 7. I'd love to hear your rationale as to why you have them.
I mean, I'll say this. I mean, I think about Xavier Lee. Think about where Xavier Lee was as a freshman. I mean, he was a backup point guard that looked totally lost and then jumped out of nowhere to become a contributor in his sophomore year. I mean, it's really rare for guys at Princeton to contribute as a freshman. I think Malik Abdul-High, you mentioned him. The other guy that I think could be really good, he was someone that Penn, while Steve Donahue was coaching, coveted as well, and that's Jack Stanton, who Bart Torvik projects him to make a pretty big sophomore leap. They've got him in a projected offense rating of 110 points per 100 possessions. I think he could be a really good point guard to hand the keys to him. You know, if Princeton's going to be good, you're basically counting on Dalen Davis to have a massive season, and I think that he has the talent to do it. So you're basically banking on him having a big turnaround season there was a lot of red on his Torvik page from last year, especially in conference play. I mean, he had an offensive rating of like 82.3 points per 100 possessions, which is just rough. But the bull case for them is that you get some sort of contribution from Stanton Davis as a good new backcourt combo, and then you hope that someone like CJ Happy or Jacob Huggins, one of those guys with length that hasn't had a big role in the past, takes a step forward. And it's plausible to see that. I think with Princeton, it's really just banking on the coach and the prior track record of success.
Yeah. And all the roads will lead to Ithaca, New York this year, where Ivy League Madness is taking place. I think we know at least who the first two teams are, or Cope at least for your top three. I know you have Harvard at third, but whoever that fourth team will be interesting. But no matter what, you have to get it done on 2 days in March in Ithaca this year. So we'll be very, very excited to see when that time comes. But a lot of basketball will be played before then. So no matter what the preseason standings are, no matter what the analytic projections are, you still got 5 months of basketball to play, and that's what makes this worth watching and talking about. So, Ian, thank you so much for coming on and talking Ivy League and Penn basketball with us. We very much appreciate it. Any final thoughts before we hop on out of here?
Yeah, I mean, I think just from a macro college basketball perspective, I'm trying to cherish this year as much as I can because it feels like one of the last gasps before so much of what we love kind of falls apart. I mean, I view this like the last quote unquote real tournament. Once the tournament expands, you see teams that be on the 14 and 15 line get shoved into play-in games. You know, on one level, I'm almost counting the years before the Big Ten and SEC break away and try to kill this thing forever. So I'm trying to embrace this as much as I can. And, you know, if you're only standing for enjoying a season is a championship, you're going to be disappointed much more often than not. So to Jake's point, I mean, I'm an obsessive Giants fan. I get more often than not, I'm miserable. But this year, the team might be bad, but there's at least stuff to look forward to on a week-to-week basis. There's stuff to be excited about. And I think that if you're a Penn fan, you have to recognize that you're trying to build towards something in the future and just enjoy the small victories along the way, stuff you can hang on to over the summer and the early fall.
Well said. Cope, I hate the hat change, but your final thoughts as well before we sign out of here.
Yeah, so before we record for another 2 hours here, it is very real what Ian said. I'm very disappointed that that's unfortunately the reality that we have. But yeah, this could be our last dance, our last ride with a 68 team tournament as we know it. Leave it up to the NCAA to break something that doesn't need fixing, to try to solve a problem that they do not have. To move this tournament, the idea to make play-ins and make Tuesday and Wednesday even more, it's for money, it's for TV. It's an absolutely horrific idea on every single level besides that. Competition-wise, there's no reason that a power conference team, just because they play a tough schedule that finishes one game over 500, should get in. Last year, if you take into account who was on the next four out, or who would have been closer than that. If you just look at the reality, what a 76-team tournament would have been like that would have been last year. Nebraska, who did not qualify for the Big Ten tournament, would have been right on the cut line. That finished 15th, 16th in the Big Ten. How come they get in? What did they do to get in? They didn't make. Why, they play a hard schedule? Ian, you got me going down a path here on an Ivy League preview where I'm here talking about something else. But this league is awesome. This league is a ton of fun. This league is deep. Kevin Hovde, I think, will be very good, and Columbia will make a run. Don't forget, Dartmouth made Ivy Madness for the first time in the school's history. Dave McLaughlin had an unbelievable season, and they're returning 3 starters, including Brandon Mitchell-Day, who can make a first team or maybe be a player of the year candidate. You have Brown, that I think is going to be very good now that they're healthy and bigger. Like this league rocks. This league is awesome. It's one of the best in college hoops. There's great coaching that needs to maximize the talent, which stays, develops, get better. This league is awesome. It will be once again. I don't think anybody will get past Yale. But looking forward to another great year in the Ivy League, which might be the last one, as we know, with 68 teams. So I apologize, Ian. You got me going. I could be dog tired, barely being able to keep my eyes open. But you say something along the lines of tournament expansion to me, and you will wake me. You'll wake me right up and get going. But regardless, it was great to have you on. Great to see you again. The next time I will see your face will be in the Palestra, and I look forward to that.
Yeah, see you guys soon. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And make sure you guys follow all of Ian's work at ivyhoopsonline.com. Is that right? ivyhoopsonline.com?
Yes, you did.
There we go. Just had to double check. Maybe I say it multiple times to get more and more traffic going your way. But check him out. Check him out on Twitter as well. Thank you all for tuning in as always. I wanted to do one quick shout out too, and that was to my sweatshirt, the Philadelphia Union, winning the first playoff game on Sunday night against Chicago Fire in PKs, which was awesome. So hopefully a long, sustained playoff run all the way to the MLS Cup Finals, which would be on the same day as the Big Five Classic. So if that does happen, I got some decisions to make. But a long time before that happens, they got to win some more games first. So I just want to give a shout out to the Union, though. And Ian, shout out to you. Thank you for coming on and chopping up as always on for about Penn and the Ivy League. For my money, the most underrated league in college basketball, because I think people discount the fact when they see Ivy League, they just think of academics, and they don't think academics and athletics can necessarily translate with each other, but they do. And this is a lot better league than people think year in and year out. As you see every year, almost every year, they're upsetting a team that they are, underdogs against, and it's awesome to see. But people, I just think, discount the league, but it's always one of the most fun ones. It's definitely an underrated one in terms of talent, and it should be fun again this year, although I do think Yale will dominate, as we have mentioned ad nauseum in the last 20 minutes or so here. But thanks again for coming on, Ian, and thank you all for tuning in as always. This is the second preview of the preview season here this week, so definitely check out our next one, which will be coming out tomorrow. But until then, we'll see you.